So today we're going to be going over what upper cross syndrome is and a couple different ways that we can start to fix that, okay? So upper cross syndrome is a common posture or pattern of postural distortion that we see in not only athletes, but also general population people as well. So what that kind of looks like is going to kind of be a rounded shoulder, kind of hunchback looking person with their head kind of protruded forward. So in an extreme example, it's kind of like this, but a lot of people have different varying degrees of that, okay? A lot of that is because we do a lot of things with our hands out in front of us, not only from training and sport, but just life, driving, writing, typing on keyboard. We kind of get closer to the things that we work on. So that's just kind of human nature. So things get short basically in the front, our head gets pulled forward, and things kind of get too lengthened in the back. So that is all stuff that we're going to want to fix. And we're going to want to fix that because these kind of patterns of tight muscle groups and muscle groups that are too long or too loose, or one way of putting it, too stretched out, those patterns can start to cause joint pain and injury over time through lots of wear and tear or lots of motion in those, or being stuck in that range of motion. So we want to make sure that we can move through a full range of motion in order to get proper joint functioning. And then if we have proper joint functioning, not only do things hurt less, but we can demonstrate higher levels of performance in strength sports and in field sports. Now, so the reason why it's called upper cross syndrome is because there's two groups of muscles there's two patterns that muscle groups fall into here. There's tight or facilitated muscle groups, and then there's inhibited or stretched out muscle groups. So, and those muscle groups kind of cross each other, as you've been seeing in the picture there, to make an X, hence the name upper cross syndrome. So from the side, our pecs and our chest, the front part of our shoulder here, is going to be tight. So that's going to pull that shoulder forward. And then our upper traps are also going to be tight. That's going to kind of pull our shoulders up to our ears. Then our neck flexors, or the muscles right here that kind of run in the front of the neck, are weak or like stretched out or loose because our neck's protruded forward. And then our low traps, mid back to low traps, which is a common weak point in a lot of people, are going to be too stretched out because of that hunched forward position. So now we're going to go over a couple different ways that we can start to fix this common pattern of dysfunction. So the first way that we're going to do it is we want to kind of down regulate or kind of calm down those tight muscle groups, which again, pecs and upper traps. So we can do that through myofascial release, SMR, pressure point therapy with a lacrosse ball or other implements, or we can do that through stretches. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways to stretch both of those areas here. So first, starting with the pecs. Pretty good one is you would take a lacrosse ball, you can go on a door or in a doorway here, pin that spot right on the front of your shoulder. Feel free to roll around and find tight spots, tender areas, okay? And then kind of roll out that area there. Then once you're on a tight point, pressure point, that kind of tight spot there, you can reach your arm up, okay? A couple times. I like sliding my arm up, okay? And just for a second, kind of loosening up that area. Next one for the pecs is a stretch. So this can be done in a rack or it could be done in a doorway at home. You're going to take your arms up at 45 degrees, turn your thumbs to the back of the room, try to keep your elbows locked out, ribs down, and then you're going to slowly lean forward so that you feel a big stretch in the front of the chest. Try not to arch up there, that'll kind of negate the stretch. Pinch your shoulder blades together to pull yourself a little bit more into extension there, okay? Now, while we started with arms straight, thumbs facing the back of the room, sometimes I like to play around with this. So sometimes I feel a little bit more of a stretch if I'm pinching my shoulder blades back, but my palms are flat against the doorway, okay? Sometimes I can go down a little bit farther. I feel a little bit more of a stretch there. So personally, I kind of like pinching my shoulders, palms flat against the rack or doorway, trying to keep my ribs down, then moving forward there. Try a couple different ways for you. So, last stretch that we're gonna do for the pecs, this is actually my favorite pec stretch exercise, is we're gonna set a barbell up in a rack. It's gonna be behind us. We're going to put our hands on the barbell. Take a staggered stance there if you want, and you're gonna pull your chest open by trying to pinch your shoulder blades together. Okay, you're gonna feel this all through your chest and into your bicep area as well. Okay. And you're gonna take big deep breaths, keep trying to pinch those shoulder blades together, pull that chest open even more. Now, the more you go down and get that arm into extension, the deeper the stretch will be, or to a certain point, the closer you get your hands, the deeper the stretch will be. I feel that a little bit more in the biceps when I put my hands a little bit closer as opposed to pec, but that's okay. So you can start nice and wide and low, and then gradually work into a greater range of motion there with that stretch. So now that we've gone over how to down-regulate your pecs, stretch out your pecs, we're gonna go over a couple ways to do your upper traps. So this is one of my favorite ways to actually roll out your upper traps because it's an area for myself personally that requires a lot of pressure. So I like to set up a barbell in the rack at about the same height that I would rack it or put it at the squat. I'm gonna put it right there on my upper traps. I'm gonna put my hands on top of the barbell so I can pull it down into my traps. I'm just gonna roll back and forth. Then, once you're on the spot that is sore, tight, tender, you can move your head back and forth, look away, come back and forth. Next thing we're going to do for our traps is to do a banded stretch. You're going to step on one end of the band. You're going to put that band right over your shoulder here. Then you're going to let that band pull your shoulder down away from the ear, and you're going to tilt your head away towards the opposite shoulder, your ear towards the opposite shoulder. So you feel a big stretch all up your neck and all into your traps. If you want a little bit more, you put your hand right on your head there and get a really big deep stretch all throughout your neck and shoulders. So the next thing that we're gonna do to start to fix upper cross syndrome is we're gonna train the pecs through a full range of motion. A lot of our exercises that hit the pecs, our pressing exercises, don't actually get the whole shoulder through a full range of motion. Bench press, we stop above the chest. Most of the time, even when we're doing a dumbbell bench press, we're gonna come down to right there, press back up. Push-ups, unless we're doing deficit push-ups, which we'll go over in a second, only your chest can't go through the floor, so you kind of get your shoulders right to 90 degrees, okay? Instead of pulling that shoulder all the way back and then pushing up. So, as a mobility training tool, not necessarily a strength tool, especially at the start, but as a mobility training tool, we can perform these exercises through a full range of motion to get a really deep stretch and cement some newfound range of motion in the shoulders. So, a full range of motion light dumbbell bench press would be shoulder blades pinched back, chest up, pull those shoulders, pull that chest open, press back up. Now, one thing that we want to be really careful of is to make sure we're not going down too far range of motion and then having our shoulders dump forward. Over time, doing that too much, that'll bug our shoulders. But shoulders pinch back, chest up, pull that chest open, don't let that shoulder roll forward, and then press back up. Another example of how you can train the pecs through a full range of motion would be, as I mentioned before, a deficit push-up. So again, if I'm on the floor, my pecs, and I'm doing a push-up, my pecs will only get worked to about 90 degrees, and then I'll have to press back up. I can allow for a little bit more of a range of motion if I elevate my hands. Okay, this can be boxes, plates, mats that you would elevate a deadlift on, whatever you got in your gym. And pinch those shoulders together, just like you were doing with the dumbbell bench press, and then press back up. Same thing that you want to be aware of. Don't let your shoulders dump forward before you press back up. So it's not like that. It's pull that chest open, press back up. The reason why we're training the pecs through a full range of motion is it's kind of a case of use it or lose it. If we're constantly out front, okay, our pecs are not going to learn that they don't need to be able to handle that extreme stretched range of motion. So it's not going to let us get there. And since we don't have any strength developed there, we don't have the ability to handle that position, your body inherently knows that it could get hurt in that position, so it doesn't want you to, so it keeps you from getting there in the first place. So make sure that you maintain that full pec range of motion by training it through a full range of motion with weights. Now, the last thing that we want to do to start to fix upper cross syndrome is to really train the crap out of the upper back. Now, there is a caveat to that though. Again, one of the things that we're talking about is strong and tight upper traps, okay? So when we talk about upper back, we want to hit like the rotator cuff, posterior aspects of the shoulder, but we want to hit the mid and low traps as well to make sure that the strength of those muscle groups catch up to the strength of our upper traps. So kind of showing you an example with a simple band pull apart, okay? Good band pull apart, hips down, shoulders away from the ears, pinch your shoulders, bring it back. Arms nice and straight. One thing that you'll see people who are struggling with this, using too much of their upper traps, is they'll still kind of shrug up in order to pull that band apart. That just kind of feeds into the problem. So you want to keep those shoulders down, squeeze the mid-back area, okay, in order to hit those middle to lower traps. So we were just talking about working the upper back, especially focusing on the mid to low trap area, not necessarily making sure that we don't necessarily just only work the upper trap area, because that kind of feeds into the problem. One movement that I really like for myself personally, I do a lot in my warm-ups, and for kids to kind of feel where their mid-back and low traps, mid-traps are, is called a lat path or a scat pull-up. So you're gonna grab on the pull-up bar, okay, dead hang for a second, turn your elbows to the front of the room, then pull your shoulder blades down into your back pocket. So turn, pull, turn, pull. After doing a couple sets of 5 to 10 of these, you should be able to have an athlete or an individual feel the pulling of their shoulder blades down with that mid to low trap area. That's a great movement to also strengthen the lower traps, strengthen the mid traps, rhomboid area, to start to fix that upper cross syndrome also.